Hi, welcome to another video. So if you watched my previous video, then you already know that I covered Gemma 4 itself and why I thought it was one of the first Gemma releases that actually looked genuinely useful for local agent work. But now, we have something even more interesting for local power users, and that is SuperGemma-4. This is basically a community fine-tuned uncensored version of Gemma 426b, and the one I'm focusing on today is the SuperGemma 426b uncensored MLX 4-bit V2 release by GGUF on Hugging Face. So, to be very clear, this is not an official Google release. The base model is Google's Gemma 426b A4B instruction-tuned model, but this version is a separate fine-tune built for people who want a less restricted local model. And honestly, I think a lot of people wanted exactly this the moment Gemma 4 came out, because the stock Gemma 4 base is already quite strong for agent workflows. Google's official Gemma 426b A4B model has native system prompt support, function calling, up to 256K context, and that mixture of experts design, where only around 3.8 billion parameters are active during inference, even though the model has about 25 billion total parameters. So, the base is already very interesting. The question was never really whether Gemma 4 had the right architecture. The real question was whether somebody would make a version that feels more open, more permissive, and a bit more useful for actual local-style workflows. And that is exactly the pitch of SuperGemma-4. On the Hugging Face page, the creator describes this as a faster, sharper, uncensored Gemma 426b for Apple Silicon. It is specifically the fast text-only line, which is important to know. So if you were mainly interested in the multimodal side of Gemma 4, then this exact release is not that. This one is for text, coding, tool use, browser tasks, planning, and general agent work. That actually makes a lot of sense to me, because if you are using something like Hermes Agent or OpenClaw, what you usually care about most is not image understanding. You care about whether the model can follow instructions, handle tools, write code, reason properly, and not constantly refuse things in annoying ways. And, according to the SuperGemma model card, that is where this release is supposed to shine. They are claiming a quick bench overall score of 95.8 compared to 91.4 for the original local 4-bit baseline, and average generation speed of 46.2 tokens per second compared to 42.5 on the same machine. They also show gains in code, logic, Korean, and browser workflows. Now, obviously, take those numbers with a grain of salt because they are the creator's own benchmarks from the model card, but still, the direction is what matters here. This does not look like one of those weird, uncensored fine-tunes that becomes chaotic, overly roleplay heavy, or just forgets how to do practical work. It is trying to be an uncensored model that is still actually useful. And that is the part I like. I have not tested it on general questions because I have no idea of providing post-training things like I'm old. Now let's talk about how you would actually use this thing. Since this specific release is built for Apple Silicon, the intended path is MLX. The setup is actually pretty simple. First, install MLX LM. You can just run pip install -u MLX-LM. Once that is done, start the local server with MLX_LM.server, pass the UNCENSORED SuperGemma model ID, and use the -- port 808 flag. I will put the exact command on screen, and this is a very important note from the model card itself. The author says to let MLX_LM.server auto-detect the bundled template. Do not manually force a chat template path, because they specifically say that doing that can corrupt responses. So if somebody tried an earlier build and thought the reasoning was broken, the author is basically saying that at least one of those issues was actually a serving template problem, and not the weights being bad. That is a pretty important clarification. If you just want to do a quick sanity check before wiring it into other tools, you can also run MLX_LM.generate with the same model ID, add a test prompt, and set max tokens to something like 512. So from the MLX side, this is not hard at all. Now, once that local server is running, the fun part begins, because anything that can talk to an OpenAI-compatible endpoint can basically use it. And this is where Hermes Agent becomes super interesting. If you watched my Hermes videos, then you already know why I like it so much. Hermes gives you that terminal first agent workflow with tools, memory skills, MCP support, messaging integrations, and all that good stuff. So pairing Hermes with SuperGemma-4 makes a lot of sense. You basically go into Hermes model setup, choose the custom OpenAI compatible route, point it to your local MLX server, select the SuperGemma model, and that is pretty much it. Now you have a local uncensored Gemma 4 style model sitting behind a proper agent shell. That is really cool for sure. And the reason I think this combo matters is because Gemma 4 already has that native function calling and system prompt support in the base design. So Hermes is not trying to force some random local chatbot into agent behavior. It is using a model family that was already built with agent workflows in mind, and then layering that with a more open fine-tune. That is exactly the kind of stack I think local users should care about. Now let's come to OpenClaw. OpenClaw is obviously a different kind of product. It is more of a personal assistant, task runner, and multi-channel agent setup instead of just a terminal agent, but the same basic idea applies. If you have SuperGemma-4 running locally through MLX, then OpenClaw can use it through a custom OpenAI-style provider path. So instead of using some cloud API, you can point OpenClaw at your local SuperGemma endpoint and use that as the reasoning model behind your assistant workflows. They also mentioned that you can raise the wired memory limit with a systel setting if needed. So there is some tuning headroom there if you already have the hardware. Now, what if you're not on a Mac? Well, that is where the GGUF version comes in. There is also a SuperGemma-4 26B uncensored GGUF v2 release on Hugging Face, and that one is meant more for the general llama.cpp style ecosystem. According to that page, it is a Q4_K_M GGUF, and Hugging Face shows it at around 16.8 gigabytes. So if you are on Windows or Linux, or if you just prefer the broader GGUF stack with llama.cpp, LM Studio, Jan, OpenWebUI, or similar tools, then that is the version you should be looking at instead of the MLX one. And that is really good because it means this is not only a Mac story. The GGUF page also says it uses a neutral embedded template to avoid one of the older prompt writing bugs where normal prompts could drift into coding mode or weird tool call behavior. So that should make the general chat experience a bit cleaner as well. And again, once you run the GGUF through a local server that exposes an OpenAI-compatible interface, you can still use it with Hermes, OpenClaw, and similar tools in basically the same way. So to summarize this whole thing very simply, I would say this. If you watched my previous Gemma 4 video and thought, okay, this is a strong local base, but I want something less filtered, then SuperGemma 4 is basically that answer. It is a community uncensored take on Gemma 4 26B, built first around Apple Silicon MLX, and it seems specifically optimized for the kinds of tasks people actually care about in agent workflows, like coding, tool use, logic, and browser tasks. If you're on a good Mac, you can run it through MLX very easily. If you use Hermes Agent, this is a really cool local model to plug into it. If you use OpenClaw, you can also point your assistant stack at it through a custom OpenAI-compatible provider. And if you're not on Mac, there is also a GGUF variant for the general llama.cpp world. So this is great for sure. Personally, I think this is one of the more interesting community Gemma releases precisely because it is not just trying to be edgy for the sake of it. It is trying to be uncensored while still staying practical. And if that balance really holds up in real use, then this could become one of the nicer local Gemma 4 variants to run. Overall, it's pretty cool. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you liked this video, consider donating through the Super Thanks option or becoming a member by clicking the Join button. Also, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye.